Margaret Maggie Harper was a woman who lived a quiet and simple life. At 78 years old, she spent most of her days tending to her garden, baking pies for her grandchildren, and enjoying the peaceful rhythm of small-town living. Maggie wasn't someone who craved attention or looked for excitement. She liked things just the way they were, calm, predictable, and full of little joys. Her grandson, Kevin Harper, however, had different ideas. He was a lively young man in his late 20s, always looking for ways to spice up his life, and sometimes he tried to do the same for others whether they wanted it or not. One day while visiting Maggie at her cozy home, Kevin came up with what he thought was a brilliant idea. A popular morning talk show called Good Morning America was hosting a segment on heartwarming human interest stories, and Kevin decided that his grandmother would be perfect for it. Kevin convinced Maggie to join him on the trip to the studio, telling her how fun it would be to share some of her favorite memories from over the years. Maggie, who loved spending time with her grandson, agreed without hesitation. She packed her nicest dress, brushed her silver hair neatly, and set off with Kevin, unaware of the surprise waiting for her. When they arrived at the studio, everything seemed normal at first. The crew greeted them warmly, and Lisa Bennett, the cheerful host of the show, introduced herself with a bright smile. Kevin chatted enthusiastically about how special his grandmother was, sharing funny anecdotes about her love for gardening and baking. But then, Kevin added something unexpected. He told Lisa and the producers a little white lie. He said that Maggie used to play the piano professionally when she was younger. Now, this wasn't entirely true. Maggie did enjoy playing the piano, but only as a hobby. She often played simple tunes during family gatherings, delighting her children and grandchildren with familiar melodies like Happy Birthday or Silent Night. What Kevin didn't know was that Maggie's talent went far beyond these casual performances. Still, he thought it would be hilarious to see her reaction if the show asked her to play live on television. To him, it was all in good fun, a harmless prank. The moment came sooner than expected. As Lisa welcomed Maggie onto the stage, she turned to the audience with an eager grin. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "we have a very special guest today. Margaret Harper, better known as Maggie, is here with us, and I hear she has a hidden talent." The crowd clapped politely, curious about what was coming next. Lisa gestured toward the grand piano sitting center stage. "Maggie," Kevin tells, "you used to play the piano professionally, is that right?" she asked, her tone light and teasing. Maggie froze for a second, unsure of how to respond. She glanced at Kevin, who gave her a mischievous wink, silently urging her to go along with the joke. Feeling cornered but not wanting to ruin the mood, Maggie nodded hesitantly. "Well, I suppose I can give it a try," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the murmurs of the audience. Some people chuckled, assuming this was part of the act. Others exchanged amused glances, clearly expecting a clumsy attempt at a nursery rhyme or maybe even a comical mistake. As Maggie made her way to the piano, the atmosphere in the room shifted slightly. There was a mix of anticipation and mild amusement, as though everyone was waiting for the punchline of a well-timed joke. Maggie sat down on the bench, adjusting her posture carefully. She placed her hands gently on the keys, taking a deep breath to steady herself. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes, recalling memories of long-forgotten lessons and practice sessions from decades ago. Then, she began to play. The first notes rang out clearly, silencing the scattered laughter in the room. It wasn't the clumsy melody the audience had anticipated. It was something far more complex and beautiful. Maggie's fingers danced across the keys with precision and grace, producing a sound that seemed almost otherworldly. The piece she chose was Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor, one of the most technically demanding compositions ever written for the piano. Yet, under Maggie's touch, it flowed effortlessly, each note resonating with emotion and depth. The audience fell silent almost immediately. People stopped fidgeting in their seats, and even the cameramen paused mid-adjustment, captivated by the music filling the studio. Lisa Bennett, who had been leaning casually against her desk, straightened, up in astonishment. Her mouth hung open slightly as she realized this was no ordinary performance. Kevin, seated in the front row, stared at his grandmother in disbelief. He had never seen or heard anything like this before. All those years of teasing her about her little hobby suddenly felt embarrassingly short-sighted. How could he have missed something so extraordinary? By the time Maggie reached the final chords of the prelude, the entire studio was holding its breath. When she finished, there was a split second of stunned silence before the room erupted into applause. People stood up cheering and whistling, their faces glowing with admiration. Maggie, still seated at the piano, looked around nervously, unsure of what to make of the overwhelming response. Lisa hurried over to her, practically giddy with excitement. "Maggie, that was absolutely incredible. Where did you learn to play like that?" she exclaimed, her voice trembling with awe. Maggie blushed deeply, waving her hand dismissively as if to downplay the praise. "Oh, it's just something I picked up a long time ago," she replied modestly, though her eyes sparkled with a hint of pride. Backstage after the segment, the energy was electric. Producers, crew members, and fellow guests swarmed around Maggie, eager to meet the woman whose performance had left such a lasting impression. Kevin finally found his chance to speak with her privately. "Grandma, why didn't you tell me you could play like that?" he asked, his voice filled with equal parts wonder and guilt. Maggie smiled warmly, patting his arm affectionately. "You never asked, dear," she said simply. And in that moment, Kevin realized just how much he still had to learn about the remarkable woman who had shaped his life. Little did anyone know, this was only the beginning of Maggie's journey. What started as a harmless prank had opened the door to a world of possibilities, and a chance for Maggie to rediscover a part of herself she had kept hidden for far too long. After the initial shock of Maggie's performance wore off, the atmosphere in the studio shifted dramatically. People who had come to watch a light-hearted morning show found themselves deeply moved by what they had just witnessed. The audience erupted into applause again and again, refusing to let the moment end. Some even wiped away tears, touched not only by the beauty of the music but also by the unexpectedness of it all. Lisa Bennett, still recovering from her own surprise, leaned closer to Maggie with genuine curiosity. "Maggie," she began, her voice filled with admiration, "I have to ask, where did you learn to play like that? That was absolutely breathtaking." Her question echoed the thoughts of everyone in the room. How could such an unassuming elderly woman possess such incredible talent? Maggie hesitated for a moment, unsure of how much to share. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially for something so personal. But as she looked around at the sea of curious faces, she felt a warmth growing inside her. These people weren't mocking her or laughing at her, they were truly interested in her story. Taking a deep breath, she decided to open up. "Well," Maggie started slowly, her voice soft but steady. "When I was younger, I studied piano. Very seriously. I trained under some wonderful teachers in New York City, and for a while I even performed in concerts across Europe." She paused, smiling faintly as memories flooded back. "But then, life happened. I met my husband, Daniel, and we started a family. Raising our children became my priority, and my music took a back seat." The room grew quieter as Maggie spoke, everyone hanging on her every word. Lisa nodded thoughtfully, encouraging her to continue. "So, you stopped performing altogether?" Lisa asked gently. Maggie nodded. "Yes, pretty much. Once the kids were grown, I didn't feel the need to go back to performing. Music became something I did just for myself, for fun, you know? It was enough to sit at the piano now and then and play whatever came to mind." She chuckled softly, shaking her head. "To be honest, I never imagined anyone would want to hear me play again." Kevin stood nearby, listening intently. He felt a strange mix of emotions swirling inside him: pride for his grandmother, guilt for underestimating her, and awe at the depth of her hidden past. Growing up, he had always known Maggie as the sweet, quiet woman who baked cookies and told funny stories about her garden. Discovering this other side of her was like finding a treasure chest buried beneath layers of familiarity. As the interview continued, Lisa couldn't resist asking another question. Do you think you'll ever consider performing again? After today, I'm sure there will be plenty of people eager to hear more from you. Maggie laughed lightly, clearly amused by the idea. Oh, I don't know about that, she said with a wave of her hand. This was already more excitement than I expected for one day. But there was a flicker of something in her eyes, a spark of possibility, perhaps. Even though she dismissed the idea outwardly, it was clear that the thought intrigued her. By the time the segment ended, Maggie's performance had already begun making waves beyond the studio walls. Clips of her playing Rachmaninoff were uploaded online within minutes, spreading like wildfire across social media platforms. Viewers were captivated not only by her skill, but also by the contrast between her humble demeanor and the brilliance of her playing. Comments poured in from all over the world praising her artistry and marveling at her humility. Who knew this sweet grandma could play like that? One viewer wrote. Absolutely stunning. She made that piano sing. Another commented, what a beautiful reminder that talent can hide in the most unexpected places. Even professional musicians weighed in, calling her rendition of the prelude one of the finest interpretations they'd ever heard. One renowned pianist tweeted, if I could play half as well as she did today, I'd retire happy. Back home, Maggie's phone began ringing nonstop. Friends, neighbors, and distant relatives called to congratulate her, many of them admitting they had no idea she was such a gifted musician. Kevin fielded calls from reporters and producers eager to feature Maggie in interviews and articles. At first, the sudden influx of attention overwhelmed her. She spent hours sitting by the window in her living room, staring out at her garden as if trying to ground herself amidst the chaos. But despite her initial hesitation, Maggie couldn't deny the joy she felt when she saw how much her performance had touched others. Strangers sent messages sharing their own stories of rediscovering forgotten passions after seeing her on TV. A young mother wrote about how Maggie's story inspired her to pick up painting again after years of putting it aside. An older man described how hearing her play reminded him of his late wife, who had also loved classical music. These reactions warmed Maggie's heart in ways she hadn't anticipated. For decades, she had kept her music private, believing it was meant only for her and her family. Now she realized it had the power to connect with people far beyond her immediate circle. It was humbling and exhilarating. Kevin noticed the change in his grandmother almost immediately. Though she still preferred her quiet routines, there was a new lightness in her step, a renewed sense of purpose. One evening, as they sat together, in her cozy kitchen sipping tea, Kevin finally worked up the courage to broach the subject. Grandma, he said carefully, what do you think about doing more performances? Just small ones, maybe? You've got so much to offer, and it seems like people really want to hear you play. Maggie raised an eyebrow, pretending to scold him. You're not trying to pull another prank on me, are you? She teased, her lips curling into a smile. No pranks this time, I promise, Kevin replied quickly, holding up his hands in mock surrender. I'm serious, Grandma. Watching you play that day, it made me realize how special your gift is. And honestly, I think it would be amazing if you shared it with more people. Maggie thought about his words for a long moment, stirring her tea absent-mindedly. She had spent most of her life prioritizing others, her husband, her children, her grandchildren. Her own dreams had taken a backseat without her even realizing it. But now, at 78 years old, she found herself wondering, why shouldn't she take this opportunity to do something for herself? I'll think about it, she said finally, her tone thoughtful but firm. But only if it feels right. No pressure, okay? Kevin grinned, relieved and excited. Deal, he said. No pressure. Over the next few weeks, offers began pouring in from venues and organizations eager to feature Maggie. Some wanted her to perform at prestigious concert halls. Others invited her to appear on late-night talk shows or participate in charity events. While she declined the majority of these requests, one invitation caught her eye. A charity gala hosted by Lisa Bennett herself. The event aimed to raise funds for arts education programs for underprivileged children, a cause close to Maggie's heart. When Kevin showed her the details, she felt a tug of inspiration. Maybe this was her chance to give back, not just through her music, but by supporting the next generation of artists. "I think I'd like to do this one," Maggie said, quietly, surprising even herself. Kevin's face lit up with excitement. "Are you sure?" he asked, wanting to make absolutely certain she was comfortable. Maggie nodded, her expression resolute. "Yes. If my music can help someone else find their passion, then it's worth it." With that decision, preparations began. Kevin helped Maggie choose pieces to include in her set, offering suggestions and listening intently as she practiced. He marveled at how easily she transitioned between complex classical compositions and heartfelt improvisations. Despite her age, her fingers moved with remarkable agility, as if the years had melted away whenever she sat at the piano. As the date of the gala approached, Maggie felt a mix of nerves and anticipation. This wouldn't just be another performance, it would be a statement, a declaration that it's never too late to embrace your passions, no matter how long they've been tucked away. And though she didn't say it aloud, Maggie knew this was more than just a night of music. It was a chance to honor the dreams she had once set aside, and to inspire others to do the same. The night of the charity gala arrived, and Maggie stood backstage, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. She had spent the past few weeks preparing for this moment, but nothing could have fully prepared her for the grandeur of the event. The venue was a stunning ballroom in downtown Los Angeles, decorated with sparkling chandeliers and elegant floral arrangements. Tables filled with well-dressed guests stretched across the room, each person eagerly awaiting the evening's performances. Kevin stayed close by her side, sensing her anxiety. "You're going to be amazing, Grandma," he whispered encouragingly. "Just remember, it's not about perfection. It's about sharing your love for music." Maggie smiled faintly, appreciating his words. "I know," she replied softly. "But it's been so long since I've played for anyone outside the family. What if they don't like it?" "They'll love it," Kevin said firmly. "Trust me, you've already proven that." As Lisa Bennett took the stage to introduce the first act, Maggie watched from behind the curtain, her fingers absently tracing the folds of her navy blue gown. She had chosen the outfit carefully, a blend of sophistication and comfort, something that made her feel both confident and true to herself. Her silver hair was styled neatly, and though she wore only minimal jewelry, she carried herself with quiet grace. When Lisa finally announced her name, the room erupted into applause. Maggie took a deep breath, stepped out from behind the curtain, and walked slowly toward the piano. Every eye in the room followed her movement, and for a moment she felt exposed, vulnerable. But as she reached the piano and sat down, placing her hands gently on the keys, a sense of calm washed over her. This was where she belonged, at least for now. Before beginning her set, Maggie turned slightly to face the audience. Her voice trembled at first, but she spoke with sincerity. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began. "When I was young, I dreamed of performing on stages like this one, but life took me in a different direction, and I chose to focus on my family instead. I have no regrets about that choice. It gave me the greatest joys of my life. But tonight reminds me that it's never too late to reconnect with the things we love." Her words resonated deeply with the crowd, many of whom nodded in agreement or exchanged knowing glances with their companions. Then, without further hesitation, Maggie began to play. The first piece was Debussy's Clair de Lune, its gentle, flowing melody filling the room like moonlight spilling through an open window. From the very first note, the audience was captivated. There was something almost magical about the way Maggie played, not just technically proficient but imbued with emotion. Each note seemed to tell a story, evoking feelings of nostalgia, longing, and hope. As the final chords of Clair de Lune faded into silence, the room remained still for a brief moment before erupting into applause. Maggie paused, taking a sip of water before launching into her next selection, a lively rendition of Scott Joplin's The Entertainer. This time the mood shifted entirely. The upbeat rhythm brought smiles to the faces of the guests, some of whom tapped their feet or clapped along quietly. By the end of the piece, the entire room was buzzing with energy. For her third and final performance, Maggie chose something deeply personal, an improvisation inspired by memories of her late husband, Daniel. She explained briefly to the audience that this piece came straight from her heart, a tribute to the man who had supported her dreams even when she chose to set them aside. As her fingers danced across the keys, the music swelled with raw emotion, shifting between tender, melancholic passages and moments of joyful celebration. Tears glistened in the eyes of several audience members, including Lisa Bennett, who dabbed at her cheeks with a tissue. When Maggie finished, the room fell silent once more. This time, not out of shock, but out of reverence. Then, as if waking from a trance, the audience rose to their feet, cheering and applauding with such enthusiasm that it brought tears to Maggie's own eyes. She stood up slowly, bowing her head in gratitude, overwhelmed by the response. After the performance, guests lined up to meet Maggie, eager to express their admiration. Some thanked her for inspiring them to pursue their own passions. Others shared stories of loved ones who had also rediscovered forgotten talents later in life. A young girl, no older than 10, approached shyly with her mother. "I want to learn piano like you someday," the girl said earnestly. Maggie knelt down to her level, smiling warmly. "If you practice and believe in yourself, I know you can," she replied. "Music is a gift that belongs to everyone." Kevin watched from a distance, his chest swelling with pride. Seeing his grandmother interact with the guests, hearing their heartfelt words of appreciation, it reinforced everything he had come to realize about her over the past few weeks. Maggie wasn't just a talented musician, she was a beacon of resilience, humility, and grace. And now, thanks to her courage, countless people were finding inspiration in her journey. Later that evening, after the gala had ended and the guests had departed, Maggie sat alone at the piano for a few quiet moments. The room was dimly lit, the air heavy with the lingering echoes of her music. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, reflecting on everything that had transpired. For so many years, she had kept her talent hidden, believing it no longer had a place in her life. Now, she understood that it had never truly left her. It had simply waited patiently for the right moment to re-emerge. Kevin joined her, pulling up a chair beside the piano. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. Maggie exhaled slowly, contented smile spreading across her face. "Tired, but happy," she admitted. "It feels strange, doesn't it? All these years I thought my music was just for me, but tonight showed me that it can mean something to others too." "It definitely does," Kevin agreed. "You've touched so many lives already, Grandma. I'm so proud of you." Maggie chuckled softly, patting his hand. "Well, I couldn't have done it without you pushing me into the spotlight," she teased, "even if it started as a prank." Kevin laughed, shaking his head. "Hey, I may have gotten us here by accident, but I think we both agree it turned out pretty well." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the peaceful aftermath of the evening. Eventually, Kevin broke the quiet. "So, what's next for you, Grandma? Are you thinking about doing more performances?" Maggie tilted her head thoughtfully. "Maybe," she said after a pause. "Not anything big or overwhelming, of course. But if there are opportunities to make a difference, to inspire people the way I've been inspired, then I'd like to take them." Her answer filled Kevin with hope. He knew Maggie would never seek fame or recognition for its own sake, but he also knew she had discovered something invaluable through this experience, the power of sharing her gift with the world. Whether it was through occasional concerts, teaching lessons, or simply playing for friends and family, Maggie had found a new purpose, one that honored both her past and her present. As they left the ballroom together, arm in arm, Maggie glanced back at the piano one last time. It stood silently in the corner, bathed in soft light, a symbol of all she had achieved and all she still hoped to accomplish. Though the night was over, Maggie knew this was only the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where her music could shine not just for herself, but for everyone lucky enough to hear it. In the weeks following the charity gala, Maggie's life changed in ways she never could have imagined. The performance had been recorded and shared online, drawing millions of views within days. Social media buzzed with praise for her artistry, humility, and inspiring story. Messages poured in from people all over the world, many expressing gratitude for the way her music had touched their lives. Some wrote about how her journey encouraged them to revisit their own forgotten dreams, while others simply thanked her for creating something beautiful. Kevin helped Maggie navigate the flood of attention, setting up a basic email account where fans could send notes of appreciation. At first, Maggie felt overwhelmed by the sheer volume of responses. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and the thought of so many strangers knowing her name made her uneasy. But as she read through the messages, one by one, she began to see the impact her music had made. Each kind word reminded her that her talent wasn't just for herself. It was a gift meant to be shared. One day, while sorting through emails, Maggie came across a letter from a woman named Patricia. "Dear Mrs. Harper," it began, "I lost my husband last year, and since then I haven't been able to find joy in anything. Watching your performance brought tears to my eyes. Not because I was sad, but because it gave me hope. If you can rediscover your passion at 78, maybe there's still room for happiness in my life too." Maggie sat back in her chair, holding the printout of the message close to her chest. She felt a lump rise in her throat. It was humbling to think that her decision to step onto that stage had given someone else the strength to keep going. For years, she had kept her music private, believing it was too small to matter. Now she realized even the smallest acts of courage could ripple outward, touching lives in ways she might never fully understand. Encouraged by the positive response, Maggie decided to take Kevin's earlier suggestion seriously. She would record an album. Not a grand production, but a simple collection of her favorite pieces, some classical, some improvised, that captured the essence of who she was as a musician. She wanted the project to feel personal, like a conversation between her and whoever listened. Together, Kevin and Maggie reached out to a local recording studio explaining their vision. To their surprise, the owner agreed to help pro bono, moved by Maggie's story and eager to support her efforts. Recording sessions became a highlight of Maggie's week. Sitting in the soundproof booth, surrounded by microphones and equipment, she felt both nervous and exhilarated. It was strange to hear her playing amplified and preserved in such detail, but also deeply satisfying. Between takes, she chatted warmly with the engineers, sharing stories about her youth and laughing at Kevin's attempts to mimic her techniques on the piano. The atmosphere in the studio was light and joyful, a testament to Maggie's ability to make everyone around her feel at ease. When the album was finally complete, Kevin suggested they call it Reflections. "It fits," he explained. "These songs are reflections of your life, your memories, your heart." Maggie nodded, liking the simplicity of the title. They decided to release it independently, using platforms that allowed musicians to share their work directly with listeners. All proceeds would go to a foundation supporting arts education for underprivileged children, a cause Maggie cared deeply about. The day Reflections launched, Maggie woke up early, unable to sleep. She brewed a pot of tea and sat by the window, watching the sunrise paint the sky in soft hues of pink and orange. Part of her worried the album wouldn't resonate with people, that it might seem too quiet or old-fashioned compared to the flashy pop songs dominating the charts. But another part of her didn't care. This wasn't about fame or success. It was about leaving behind something meaningful. By mid-morning, the feedback started rolling in. Fans praised the album's intimacy and authenticity, describing it as a balm for the soul. Music critics, initially skeptical of a debut release from a septuagenarian pianist, were equally impressed. One review called Reflections a masterclass in emotional storytelling, while another hailed Maggie as a hidden gem whose light deserves to shine. As the album gained traction, invitations for performances began arriving once more. This time, however, Maggie approached them with caution. She turned down large-scale tours and high-pressure commitments, opting instead for smaller, more intimate events. One such invitation came from a community center in a nearby town, which hosted monthly concerts for seniors. Maggie accepted immediately, delighted by the idea of playing for an audience that reminded her of herself. On the day of the concert, Maggie arrived early, carrying a basket of homemade cookies to share with the attendees. The cozy venue was already filling up when she took her place at the piano. As she played, she noticed familiar faces smiling back at her, people who had lived long, full lives and understood the value of quiet moments. Afterward, several attendees approached her, thanking her not just for the music, but for reminding them of their own passions. One elderly man confessed he used to play the saxophone but had stopped after his wife passed away. Inspired by Maggie, he vowed to pick it up again. Word of these heartfelt interactions spread quickly, earning Maggie a reputation as much for her kindness as for her talent. Local newspapers featured articles about her, highlighting not only her musical achievements, but also her commitment to giving back. Schools invited her to speak to students about perseverance and following one's dreams, no matter the age. Though public speaking didn't come naturally to Maggie, she accepted these opportunities knowing they might inspire young minds to believe in themselves. Amidst all the excitement, Maggie remained grounded. She continued tending to her garden, baking pies and spending time with her grandchildren. Her mornings often began with a cup of coffee and a few pages of her favorite book, while her evenings ended with quiet reflection at the piano. These routines anchored her, reminding her that despite the whirlwind of attention, she was still the same person she had always been. Kevin marveled at how gracefully his grandmother handled everything. He had expected her to shy away from the limelight after the initial burst of interest, but instead, she embraced it in her own gentle way. Watching her connect with people, from wide-eyed children to seasoned musicians, reinforced his belief that true influence comes not from seeking recognition but from staying true to oneself. One evening, as they sat together on Maggie's porch, Kevin broached a question that had been on his mind. "Grandma, do you ever wish you'd done this earlier? Like if you'd kept performing after Grandpa died, do you think things would have been different?" Maggie thought about it for a moment, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. "Maybe," she said softly, "but I don't regret the choices I made. Your grandfather and I built a beautiful life together, and raising our family was the greatest joy of all. Music was always there, waiting for me when I needed it. And now, well, I guess it's found its way back to me." Her answer stayed with Kevin long after the conversation ended. It reminded him that life isn't about chasing every opportunity or holding on to what might have been. Sometimes, it's about trusting that the right moments will come and embracing them when they do. For Maggie, those moments had arrived unexpectedly, bringing with them a renewed sense of purpose. She knew her journey wasn't over yet. There were still songs to play, stories to tell, and hearts to touch. And though she couldn't predict exactly where this path would lead, she walked it with gratitude, knowing she had already given the world something precious, a reminder that it's never too late to let your light shine. As months passed, Maggie's life settled into a new rhythm. While she still cherished her quiet routines, tending to her garden, baking pies, and spending time with family, she also embraced the opportunities that came her way. Her performances became less frequent but more meaningful, each one carefully chosen to align with her values and passions. Whether it was playing at a nursing home, speaking to students, or participating in charity events, Maggie found joy in using her music to make a difference. One day, Kevin surprised her with an invitation he had been keeping secret for weeks. "Grandma," he began hesitantly, "there's something I want to ask you. But before you say no, hear me out, okay?" Maggie raised an eyebrow, intrigued by his tone. "All right," she said with a smile. "What is it?" Kevin took a deep breath. "The City Symphony Orchestra wants you to perform with them. They're doing a special concert series celebrating overlooked talents, and they think you'd be perfect for it." Maggie blinked in surprise. Performing with a full orchestra? It sounded like something from another lifetime, a dream she had once nurtured but long since let go. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. her voice tinged with doubt. I haven't played with an orchestra in decades. What if I mess up? You won't, Kevin assured her quickly. And besides, they're not asking you to do anything crazy. Just one piece. Something solo, where you can shine. Trust me, Grandma, you've got this. For days, Maggie wrestled with the decision. On one hand, the idea of stepping onto such a prestigious stage filled her with nerves. She imagined rows of musicians watching her, waiting for her to stumble. But on the other hand, she couldn't deny the allure of returning to the world she had loved so deeply in her youth. Finally, after much thought and some gentle prodding from Kevin, she agreed. Preparation for the concert became a family affair. Kevin helped Maggie practice, offering feedback and encouragement whenever she doubted herself. Her daughter-in-law, Susan, volunteered to handle logistics, ensuring Maggie wouldn't have to worry about transportation or wardrobe choices. Even her youngest granddaughter, Lily, joined in, sitting beside Maggie at the piano and pretending to play along during rehearsals. The night of the concert arrived, and Maggie felt a mix of excitement and apprehension as she stepped into the grand concert hall. The venue was breathtaking, with towering ceilings and velvet seats arranged in neat rows. A hush fell over the audience as the conductor introduced her, explaining how her story had inspired countless people around the world. When Maggie walked onto the stage, the crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the vast space. She sat down at the piano, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the bench. Closing her eyes, she took a moment to steady her, breathing. Then, with a soft exhale, she began to play. The piece she had chosen was Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a hauntingly beautiful composition that showcased both her technical skill and emotional depth. As the melody unfolded, the room seemed to dissolve around her. All that remained was the music, a delicate thread connecting her to everyone present. By the time she reached the final note, there was a collective intake of breath, followed by thunderous applause. People stood, clapping and cheering, their faces glowing with admiration. Backstage afterward, Maggie was greeted by members of the orchestra, who praised her performance with genuine enthusiasm. One violinist approached her, holding out a bouquet of flowers. "That was incredible," he said warmly. "You reminded us all why we fell in love with music in the first place." Maggie accepted the flowers with a shy smile, feeling overwhelmed by the kindness surrounding her. For so many years, she had believed her music belonged only to her family. Now she saw how it could bridge gaps, fostering connections between strangers and reminding people of their shared humanity. In the weeks that followed, Maggie received invitations from organizations eager to honor her contributions to the arts. A local university awarded her an honorary degree, recognizing her as a symbol of lifelong learning and perseverance. Another group invited her to serve as a guest speaker at a conference focused on aging gracefully and embracing creativity later in life. Though these accolades were unexpected, Maggie accepted them graciously, viewing them not as personal achievements, but as affirmations of the power of art to inspire and unite. Despite the growing recognition, Maggie remained firmly rooted in her community. She continued volunteering at the Senior Center, leading weekly music sessions where participants sang old favorites and learned simple tunes on the keyboard. These gatherings brought her immense joy, allowing her to share her passion with others, while creating a sense of belonging among attendees. One afternoon, as Maggie packed up her sheet music after a session, a young woman approached her timidly. "Excuse me, Mrs. Harper?" she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name's Anna. I just wanted to thank you for everything you've done. Your story, it gave me hope." Maggie turned to face her, noticing the uncertainty in Anna's eyes. "Hope for what, dear?" she asked gently. Anna hesitated before answering. "I'm trying to start over. I left a job I hated, and now I'm going back to school to study art. But sometimes I feel like I'm too old, like I missed my chance. Hearing about how you rediscovered your love for music, it made me believe I can do it too." Touched by Anna's words, Maggie placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're never too old to chase your dreams," she said firmly. "Life is full of second chances if you're willing to take them. Trust me, I know." Anna smiled, visibly relieved. "Thank you," she murmured. "Really? Thank you." Moments like these reinforced Maggie's belief that her journey wasn't just about her. It was about the ripple effect of courage and authenticity. Every time someone told her how her story had inspired them, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Music, she realized, was more than notes and melodies. It was a language capable of healing, connecting, and transforming lives. As autumn turned to winter, Maggie prepared for what would be her final public performance of the year, a small holiday concert at her church. The event was intimate, attended, mostly by friends, neighbors, and fellow congregants. Maggie had planned a program of seasonal classics, interspersed with personal anecdotes about her favorite Christmas memories. When she took her place at the piano, the warmth of familiarity enveloped her. This was her sanctuary, the place where she had first discovered her love for music, sitting beside her mother as she played carols on the organ. As Maggie began to play, the congregation joined in, singing along to timeless hymns and cheerful tunes. Voices blended with the sound of the piano, filling the chapel with a harmony that felt almost sacred. Afterward, as people lingered to chat and enjoy cookies and cider, Maggie reflected on the evening. She had always believed that music's greatest power lay in its ability to bring people together. Tonight, surrounded by the laughter and chatter of loved ones, she felt that truth more deeply than ever. Later that week, Kevin visited Maggie, bringing along a photo album he had put together. Inside were pictures from her recent performances, messages from fans, and newspaper clippings documenting her journey. "I thought you might like to keep these," he said, handing it to her. "Just reminders of everything you've accomplished." Maggie flipped through the pages slowly, her eyes misting with tears. Each image captured a moment of connection. A handshake with a stranger, a hug from a child, a standing ovation from an audience. "This is wonderful, Kevin," she whispered. "Thank you." "You deserve it, Grandma," he replied softly. "You've inspired so many people, including me." As they sat together, flipping through the album and reminiscing about the past year, Maggie felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life had taken her on an unexpected journey, one filled with challenges and triumphs alike. But through it all, she had stayed true to herself, sharing her gift with the world in ways she never could have imagined. Though she didn't know what the future held, Maggie knew one thing for certain. She would continue playing, not for fame or fortune, but because it brought her joy and allowed her to touch the lives of others. And isn't that, she thought, the greatest legacy anyone could leave behind? As the years went by, Maggie's life continued to unfold in quiet yet meaningful ways. Though she no longer performed on grand stages or appeared on television, her influence lingered like a soft melody that stays with you long after the music has ended. She remained active in her community, playing piano at local events, teaching informal lessons to eager learners, and volunteering wherever she could. Her days were simple, but they were rich with purpose. One spring morning, as Maggie watered her garden, Kevin arrived with exciting news. "Grandma," he said, his voice brimming with excitement, "you're not going to believe this. Someone wrote a book about you." Maggie turned to him surprised. "A book? About me?" she asked, laughing softly. "What on earth would anyone write about?" Kevin grinned. "About your life, your music, how you inspired so many people. It's called The Late Bloomer, and it's already getting great reviews. The author interviewed some of the people you've touched. Anna from the senior center, Patricia who wrote you that letter, even some of the kids you taught. They all said you changed their lives." Maggie shook her head, humbled by the idea. "I didn't do anything special," she murmured. "I just played the piano." "That's exactly why it's special," Kevin replied. "You did it because you love it, not for fame or money. That's what makes your story so powerful." The book became a bestseller, introducing Maggie's journey to readers around the world. Letters poured in once again, thanking her for being a beacon of hope and resilience. Schools began incorporating her story into their curriculums, using it as an example of how passion knows no age limit. Even late-night talk show hosts mentioned her name, calling her a reminder that it's never too late to follow your heart. Despite the renewed attention, Maggie stayed grounded. She attended the book launch quietly, sitting in the back of the room while others spoke about her impact. When it was her turn to say a few words, she stood up slowly, clutching the edge of the podium for support. "Thank you all for coming today," she began, her voice steady but warm. "But I want to make one thing clear. This isn't my story. It's ours. Every person who has ever picked up an instrument, painted a picture, or written a poem, they're part of this story too. Because we all have gifts inside us, waiting to be shared." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, earning a standing ovation. People left the event inspired, carrying Maggie's message with them. In the months that followed, Maggie received invitations to speak at conferences, schools, and community gatherings. She accepted a few, always emphasizing the importance of staying true to oneself and finding joy in the little things. Her talks were never flashy or rehearsed. Instead, they were heartfelt conversations filled with wisdom earned through decades of living fully and loving deeply. At home, Maggie spent more time than ever mentoring young musicians. Some were students from the local high school, eager to learn technique and theory. Others were adults rediscovering hobbies they had abandoned years ago. No matter their age or skill level, Maggie treated each student with patience and kindness, encouraging them to trust their instincts and embrace imperfection. One of her favorite students was a shy teenager named Emily. Emily had a natural talent for the piano but struggled with self-doubt, often apologizing before she even began playing. Over time, Maggie helped her build confidence, reminding her that mistakes weren't failures, they were opportunities to grow. By the end of the year, Emily had composed her own piece, which she dedicated to Maggie during a recital. As the last notes faded, Emily ran to Maggie, hugging her tightly. "Thank you for believing in me," she whispered. Maggie hugged her back, tears glistening in her eyes. As Maggie grew older, her energy began to wane. She scaled back her activities, spending more time reading, writing letters to fans, and enjoying quiet moments with her family. But even as her physical strength diminished, her spirit remained strong. She continued playing the piano every day, finding solace in its familiar rhythms. On her 85th birthday, Kevin organized a small celebration at her house. Friends, family, and former students gathered to honor her, sharing stories and laughter over homemade cake and punch. At the end of the evening, Kevin presented her with a gift, a beautifully framed photograph of her sitting at the piano during her first televised performance. Beneath it was an inscription: "To Grandma Maggie, the woman who taught us all to dream again." Tears streamed down Maggie's face as she held the frame close. "I don't know what I did to deserve such love," she said, her voice trembling, "but I'm so grateful for every moment of it." That winter, Maggie fell ill. She passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by loved ones. Her passing left a void in the hearts of those who knew her, but it also sparked a wave of reflection and gratitude. People shared memories of her online, posting videos of her performances and recounting how she had inspired them. Local newspapers ran tributes calling her a symbol of grace, humility, and enduring passion. In the spring, a memorial concert was held in her honor. Musicians of all ages came together to perform pieces she had loved, filling the air with melodies that seemed to echo her presence. At the end of the program, Kevin stepped onto the stage holding a single sheet of paper. "This is something my grandma wrote a few years ago," he explained. "She called it her final note. I'd like to read it to you now." He cleared his throat and began. "Music has been my constant companion throughout life. It has comforted me in sorrow, celebrated with me in joy, and reminded me of the beauty and simplicity. If there's one thing I hope to leave behind, it's this: never stop dreaming, never stop creating, and most importantly, never stop believing in the power of your own light to brighten the world." The audience sat in silence, moved by the simplicity and depth of her words. As Kevin folded the paper and stepped away from the microphone, the room erupted into applause, not just for Maggie's legacy, but for the countless lives she had touched. Years later, Maggie's story continued to inspire new generations. Her album Reflections remained popular, its soothing melodies offering comfort to listeners worldwide. Schools named scholarships after her, ensuring that young artists would always have the chance to pursue their dreams. And in her hometown, a plaque was placed near her beloved community center, commemorating the woman whose music had brought people together. Though Maggie was gone, her spirit lived on. In the notes of a piano, the laughter of children learning to play, and the hearts of everyone who had ever been inspired by her courage. She had shown the world that it's never too late to let your light shine, and in doing so, she had created a legacy far greater than any accolade or award. Life, Maggie often said, is like a song. Sometimes it's joyful, sometimes it's sad, but every note matters. Hers was a melody of kindness, resilience, and unwavering faith in the goodness of others, a melody that would continue to resonate for years to come.